All right, so let's get started with our first session. Here on a mission to ease your transition is Sonia Tanguay, a Senior Disabilities Coordinator at PMC. She's got a GPS map set for you. GPS is all set here, and GPS stands for going to post-secondary. And this is called Plan Your Transition. During Sonia's presentation, you can ask questions on the chat. They will be answered during the Q&A. Afterward, that Q&A will be led by Amanda. So Sonia, give us the GSP.
Thank you, Patty, for the introduction. So welcome everyone to Plan Your Transition. So today what I'll be talking about, I'll give you kind of a brief overview. I'll be talking about the transition itself, planning, the accommodation process in post-secondary, documentation requirements, what types of accommodations you may expect or assume that you may receive in university, and support services. I will plant a seed in terms of how to plan ahead as we are moving from May to the summer and the fall coming up, and then there'll be a Q&A afterwards. So moving on to the next slide. So just to get the ball rolling a little bit, we'll do a poll everywhere, similar to what Patty did earlier. So if you can log in online, pollev.com/MTC2022, you should already be in there, or text MTC 2022 to 37607. And now I want you to think, so a lot of you mentioned that you're nervous and perhaps anxious or impatient, but now think about the planning phase. So what words come to mind when you think about planning your transition to post-secondary? If you can go ahead and put the first words that come to mind. Just waiting from responses. Schedule, yes. Eek. Daunting. Impatient. Nervous. Okay, there's still a bit of anxiety around that. Rough. Okay. So feeling a bit rough about maybe not knowing, unfamiliarity. Sick, growing, stressful. Lots of variety here. Maybe stomach nervousness, so stress is coming up. It's getting a little bit small. I'll need some glasses perhaps to read. Great. So stress seems to be the most predominant one, similar to what an unsure, so unfamiliar, uncertainty, right? Okay, thank you. And perhaps failure. Okay, we'll talk about that. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you for sharing, everyone. This is a really nice way also to kind of have that collective approach, that sense of community where we're not the only ones that are feeling this way. So some of you may be moving on to post-secondary, but maybe some of you are also attending as students who are planning into going into grade 12 and thinking about university or college. So just a couple things to think about, because not all of you are moving on to next year. So when you're planning your transition and you're trying to choose your program, it's important to consider your strengths, your aptitudes, your weaknesses, but also to think about doing some labor market research. Since the pandemic and even the last little while, there's been a lot of changes in the labor market. Are there more STEM programs that may be of interest? Thinking of co-op programs and employment opportunities. So those are all things that we want to think about as your first step. So some of you have already reached out because you already have been perhaps accepted, or you will be receiving your offer of admission shortly. Next slide, please. So moving on to talking a little bit about the differences between high school and post-secondary. So when we're talking about that, I want you to think a little bit about the distinction from a legal framework and an accommodation process. So in order to access to education for students with disabilities, it's regulated. In high school, it's regulated through the Education Act, and post-secondary, it's regulated based on the Ontario Human Rights and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities. To show that a student has a disability, in high school, they can have an IEP. It can be based on a formal diagnosis, or it can be based on an informal identification, so no exceptionality. But moving on to university, or college, post-secondary, you need to have recent documentation completed by a regulated health professional that confirms both functional limitations and a diagnosis. So when I'm talking about functional limitations, I'm talking about specific areas where your disability affects you in the learning environment. I'll have to apologize for a second. I'm going to mute a chat function that I have here. There's a lot of information coming in. I think you guys can probably hear the beeps as they're coming in. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of differences, moving on for the accommodation process, the decision to disclose your disability to teachers and professors in high school, it's made by your parent or your guardian if you're under 18. In university, it's you, the student, to decide which accommodation students need. In high school, teachers can recommend various accommodations to students. Often, most students will receive, with learning difficulties, will have access to the same accommodations. We see that a lot when we look at IEPs. When we're talking about post-secondary, the disability advisor and the coordinator will review your documentation and only choose specific accommodations that meet your learning profile and functional limitations and consider essential course requirements. I'll have to apologize again. There's some noise going on. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's quite noisy over here in my office right now. Next slide. And when I'm talking about essential course requirements is the essential learning outcomes and objectives you need to actually reach in university. Now we're talking about, again, the accommodation process. So who informs teachers of your accommodation needs? In high school, the special education teacher provides each classroom teacher with their IEPs for all their students. In university, the student must request accommodations every term and follow up with professors to make sure accommodation arrangements are made. So sometimes what happens is I have students that tell me, well, you know, my documentation will get transferred over from my high school and I'm automatically registered. That's not the case. And accommodations need to be set up every term. Why? Well, because you change courses every semester and you have new professors. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about documentation requirements. And I know some of you will have questions during the chat, but just to kind of give you a brief overview here. So if you have, I have an IEP, can I use my IEP as documentation? The question is, no, not in university. So to access permanent accommodation, so that means ongoing accommodations for the duration of your degree in post-secondary education, an IEP is not sufficient documentation. Most universities require an assessment of your functional limitations to determine how your disability impacts you in a learning environment. Documentation needs to be completed by a qualified regulated health professional. That means, what does that means? It means a medical doctor, audiologist, a psychologist. At the PMC, we actually have very specific documentation forms. So if you go on our website, and this link will be shared with you, you can verify based on disability categories. So if you have autism spectrum disorder, there's a form for that. Medical disabilities, if you have a visual impairment, if you have also ADHD or mental health, we have specific forms. We also have guidelines for individuals who have learning disabilities in terms of criteria for the psychoeducational assessments. Moving on, please. I hope that you can't hear the drilling that's going on in my office too much. So in terms of support services that may be available, actually, can we go back one slide? Would that be okay? Yes. Or the slide before that, it's called academic accommodations. That's right, correct. Thank you. So when we think about accommodations and support services, what it is, they are to provide equal opportunity to meet essential course requirements, but they do not guarantee success. They are individualized according to specific disability related needs. It's important that students are actively engaged in the accommodation process, which is a bit different from high school. You need to it's a collaborative approach. And accommodations are usually formalized in a document, and we call them letters of accommodation here at the PMC, but other institutions may call them differently. And they are issued by the Disabilities Office to your professors. Next slide, please. So specific accommodations that students may receive in university may be extra time, a quiet location, access to a computer, if there's evidence that that is required, or the use of assistive learning technology. Classroom accommodations may include audio recordings of lectures, as well as captioning or note-taking support. Moving on. In terms of student support services, supplemental notes from a volunteer note taker may be available, individualized learning strategies, peer mentoring, disability counseling, assistive learning technology labs, and technology training, tutoring. And there's lots of great employment programs that can allow students to develop transferable skills. And that's in partnership with career services. Now planning ahead. So this is something that some of you may be thinking about right now as I'm talking. So before the spring and the summer, so right now actually, some of you will be getting your offers of admission very shortly. I'm sure some of you are a bit anxious about it, but this is the time to start gathering your documentation and to review the documentation requirements. When in doubt, if you don't know what you need or what you will need for your college or university, you can schedule an information meeting. And what that is we can talk about what your current documentation, what kind of current documentation you have, and if that will suffice, and this is what you will need in order to receive accommodations and learning supports in the university. If you don't have the correct information or documentation, so there's plenty of time in order to obtain that. This is also an opportunity for you to attend open house events or summer transition programs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Consider housing arrangements, financial support, and budgeting during the fall. So even though you do an intake over the summer, you will need to follow up in the fall, in early September or late August, in order to set up accommodations. A one-time appointment is not sufficient. It allows you to register, but it doesn't set up your accommodations. We use course outlines and course information in order to set up accommodations. Understand the accommodation process. So when you do that intake, that information will be shared with you. Discuss your accommodation needs with your professors and stay in contact with your coordinator. There's an important aspect here of staying in contact in order, if there's an issue, we can problem solve early and address it early. After the fall and the winter term, as we progress, you want to engage in your ability to assess and monitor your academic progress and well-being, participate in skill development opportunities in order to improve coping and academic skills. And this is something that I really want to reinforce. Stay engaged and connected with others. I know that for the last 2 years, perhaps some of you have felt perhaps more isolated. It's been, some of us have developed maybe a sense of uneasiness in terms of engaging and going out there and trying new things. But there are so many great social opportunities. And this, I know this year for sure at Carleton, we will be putting so much emphasis on this. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to announce that this year we have created a new transition program. And that transition program is called PMC Ravens Launch to Campus. So it's an event that's for new students and returning students. We thought it would be a great opportunity to connect the two. It's a 3-hour event. We have a live page that is currently available on our website, and you can actually register for the event already. What it will do, what you will learn is it will focus on strategies to help you manage academic expectations and requirements, and it will be a nice opportunity to meet other students with similar experiences in a fun and supportive environment. Workshops you will be able to choose 2 or 3 workshops during the event, and it will focus either on time management, procrastination, stress management, self-advocacy, brain-based strategies for learning, and boosting academic motivation. And this will be an online event. Next slide, please. Now let's talk a little bit about self-advocacy and what that means and why it will be important in the university. So self-advocacy, and I know the panel this afternoon, we're going to have a student panel, and I'm sure they'll talk about this, but what does it mean? It's understanding your disability and your learning profile, your learning strengths and weaknesses. Expressing your needs in a way that promotes open communication. It's collaborative. Understand your responsibility in the accommodation process. It's not just your professor, it's not just the PMC or the Disabilities Office. You have a role in this. Explain how an accommodation will address a disability related need. And self-advocacy is knowing when to ask for help. Too often I have students that tell me, Sonia, I have a hard time asking for help. And this is such an important aspect of being a good self-advocate, is not waiting too long to ask for help and recognizing what we need in order to ask. Next slide, please. And finally, maybe some quick tips in terms of self-advocacy. When you want to advocate, when you need to meet with your coordinator or talk to your profs, you want to write down some points beforehand and practice. If you're not sure what you should be talking about with your professor in terms of your accommodation needs, your coordinator, disability advisor can help you and coach you. Do that. Focus on your goal, be specific, say what action you think should be taken, propose solution. When a problem comes up, be flexible. If the solution, your proposed solution is not possible, be flexible to what else would be available to you, and ask questions. All questions are valid. And finally, before we move on to our Q&A, again, I prepared kind of a quick checklist, and this is more geared towards Carleton, but gather your documentation. Register with the Disabilities Office early. The sooner the better. Participate in summer orientation programs. The Student Experience Office has a wonderful website where you can learn about all the upcoming events that are going on. participate in the campus tour. We actually have a CU virtual experience before you even get to campus and have your feet on campus. We have mini courses. It's called CU 1001, and we have really informative learning strategies modules that you can complete over the summer if you register early, and your coordinator can give you access to that. Stay connected with Carleton by checking your email regularly. You will be receiving lots of informative information. Download the mobile CU app, and that way you can actually verify what you're receiving. And finally, the last one is reach out to your coordinator over the summer if you have any questions. If we can't help you, we will at least direct you to the right person that can provide you assistance and answer all your questions.